Hi, my name is Bruno Sade from brunosade.com. And today I want to talk about a common EFT challenge, which is how to tune in to the issue that we are wanting to work on, or to the unpleasant emotional reaction that we are seeking to diminish or release in such a way that is neither too cold nor too hot. So what do I mean by that? Tuning in such a way that would be like too cold would be like we aren't tuned in enough to that which we are trying to shift or diminish or release. So in other words, EFT, in order to work at its best or in the most effective way, it requires us to be kind of like in our feelings space, or to be like tuned in to activate the neural pathways or even the energetic pathways that are connected to the issue we are working on, right? So sometimes, for example, let's say that I'm thinking about my usual example, the fear of public speaking. And I say, yeah, so, 3 weeks ago, I had this presentation at work, or this meeting at work. And yeah, like at the time I was feeling quite nervous or quite anxious, but like at the moment, I'm not feeling it. It's like it happened 3 weeks ago and now I'm at home. I'm not in that situation anymore. Like, and so if I were to tap on my fear of public speaking or on the memory of that meeting, it's like I'm not really connecting to it. So chances are the tapping isn't gonna be very effective. So in this case, what we can do is, what I talked about in my last video, to come up, for example, with a future event that might make it a bit more real, or more present in a way, but kind of like finding a bit more detail, more specific detail, like especially when it's any kind of sensory detail. So for example, as I think about the next time that I might have a meeting or a presentation at work, and maybe I say, yeah, so my boss is going to be there, but at the moment still I'm still not connecting to it. I'm not connecting to how it makes me feel. But what if I were to zoom in on the facial expression that I imagine my boss might have as he listens to my presentation, or the tone of voice that he might have, when he asks me a question that maybe I feel that he's judging me or evaluating me in a not so positive way. And so that would be like a way, like bringing in some more detail can be a way that we can prevent the focus of our tapping from being too cold, right? Like not activated enough, in other words. And again, we want to bring in more detail, but not to the point that it distracts us from what we are feeling, right? So for example, in basic EFT, we might say, as you think about, this presentation, this upcoming presentation, and your boss is going to be there, and, he's going to have this facial expression, like looking at you like this. What feeling or sensation or emotion do you notice coming up for you? And he said, yeah, well, fear. Okay. And this fear, do you notice it anywhere in your body? And actually, yes, it's in my chest. Now, let's say, asking where in my body I'm feeling this emotion or feeling can sometimes help us like tune into our bodies, like how we are feeling in our bodies, which is another way to activate like these pathways that we're trying to activate for the tapping to work. But let's say that I were to, or the practitioner were to continue to ask me, but where in your chest do you feel it exactly? Like, is it 2 inches to the left, 2 inches to the right, etc.? And like that amount of so much detail would make me so distracted, and would make me go so much into my head that I would be going away from my feeling space, and therefore the tapping wouldn't be very effective because I'm not really tuned in anymore to the fear as I imagine my boss's facial expression listening to my presentation, right? So that's one end of the spectrum when it's too cold or not activated enough. On the other end of the spectrum, we would have, like tuning in such a way that, or to a certain issue or memory that is like too hot to touch, or like a bowl of soup that, if we are not careful, we might burn our tongues if we try to eat a bowl of soup that is too hot. So this is where the emotional intensity becomes so high, for ourselves, or for the client, if we are working with a client, that it becomes overwhelming, it becomes very uncomfortable, and sometimes it can become difficult to continue with the tapping. In these cases, we want to prevent that as much as possible. But if it happens, we can just continue tapping even without words, because we are already like tuning in to whatever brought up this very high emotional intensity. And sometimes it can also help to try to shift our attention away from whatever we were focusing on that was so triggering, and more into shift it into more like neutral or pleasant stimuli around us, such as looking at the the color of these curtains, or the texture of these curtains. Like, it's kind of like I'm a bit like distracting my attention away from that which was too intense, and I'm now focusing on something that is like feels safer rather than that memory, for example. And so I'm continuing to tap and like sending cues of safety to my nervous system, because I'm focusing on like the present moment and the environment around me, and that can like help put out the fire, to some degree. Still, you don't want to work, or it's not recommended to work on a traumatic memory by yourself. It's highly recommended in that case to enlist the help of an experienced or certified practitioner. But to prevent that too hot to touch situation from emerging, there are certain techniques, such as the gentle techniques, of which I'll be talking about in other videos, or distancing techniques, where basically it's like the opposite of the advice I gave for the too cold scenario. In this case, we don't want to zoom in so much into sensory details that might be activating or too activating. We want to kind of like zoom out. So, in future videos, I'll talk about some of these gentle techniques, and I have written some blog articles already about them, in case you want to read them. So basically, this is what I wanted to share today. To recap, when doing the tapping, and this is also what a practitioner can help you do, whether it's I myself as a client tend to struggle more with the too cold scenario. Like sometimes it's difficult for me to connect to what I'm feeling. So I have to, or whoever I'm tapping with, that they are the practitioner, they have to find ways to help me connect or feel safe enough or relaxed enough to be able to connect to what I'm feeling. And, there are different strategies for that. So this is why when we feel safe enough with a practitioner, we can then kind of like relax more into what we are feeling. And then the EFT process is probably going to be more effective. So this is how the optimal activation zone would be like that sort of middle ground between the two ends of the spectrum. And we don't need to be in the exact middle, it's not like a super precise spot that we need. EFT is a very forgiving technique, but in general, we don't want to be on either end of the spectrum, if that makes sense. So I hope this video was helpful for you, and I look forward to seeing you again on my next video.